Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Local Review Body for the 24th of February 2025. We have a reasonably short agenda this morning, but my first job, of course, as always, is to introduce the panel. So I am Councillor Bob Braun. I am the convener of the Local Review Body, and I have with me today on my left, Councillor Ian James, to my right, Councillor Grant Stewart. We are all, by requirement, members of the Planning and Placemaking Committee, which is a requirement to sit on this body. To my right, beyond Councillor Stewart, is Ms Leslie Tierney. She's a planning advisor for the LRB and has had no involvement with these applications that we're looking at today until they came forward for appeal. To my left, beyond Councillor James, is Mr Callum MacLeod, who is our legal advisor today, and it's his first time with the LRB, so a warm welcome to him. He will enjoy being part of this esteemed company. And beyond him, on his left, is Miss Audrey Brown, who is from Democratic Services. So the next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. So my two colleagues, do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor James?
None for me, convener.
And Councillor Stewart?
None, convener.
Thank you very much. Third item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting, which I'm happy to approve. None of my two colleagues today were on that meeting, so I alone can approve it, and I do so. So now I come to section 4 of the agenda, which is to hear the actual applications. So the first one on the agenda is item 4.1, which is the erection of a dwelling house land 20 metres south of Hillview, Kinnaird in Blair Adam, Kelty. And I'll ask Mrs Tierney to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Right, so we'll just run through some slides of the site and the plans. So yeah, application site just to the east of the M90 there, between the M90 and the B996, just north of Kelty. And then zooming in a bit more, you can see the two roads, cluster of houses either side of the road, and the application site within the yellow circle. And then zooming in again, so you can see kind of the houses on the other side of the road, the 3 dwelling houses and ancillary accommodation that exists to the north side of the site, and some of the trees in the surrounding area, kind of open area of ground within the circle where the application is proposed. And then these are some of the drawings that were submitted with the application. So this is the red line location plan, site plan, if you like, which shows the outline of the site and also contains the access from the site onto the B996. And this is also the access to the existing house to the north, Hillview. The 2 other properties to the north again are accessed from a separate access onto the road. And then zooming in to the site, you can see the existing dwelling house at Hillview, and then the red line application site with the access onto the main road running down towards the Kinnaird Burn that runs along the bottom of the site as well. And then the proposed site plan, so a dwelling house, similarly, exactly the same to all intents and purposes as the existing dwelling house at Hillview, and a parking area at the front. And then these are the elevational drawings, so very much match the existing dwelling house at Hillview, and you'll see those in the photos in a minute. And then this is a tree planting plan that was submitted with the application as well. So again, you can see the red line application site boundary. You can see the blue land is the other land in the ownership of the appellant. The wiggly line through the middle of that is, as I said, the Kinnaird Burn that runs along the boundary of the site and down to the south. And then that other area of ground to the south there has electricity line that runs through it, but the planting plan proposes landscaping in that area, and it appears from the papers that there were certainly trees on that site once upon a time. And then some photographs. So the application site, we're looking north here towards the application site. The bottom arrow pointing up the way is the access from the main road into Hillview and the application site. And the top arrow there highlights where the house would be located behind the existing landscaping. And then this is looking just slightly to the north of the existing site. So we can see the existing dwelling house at Hillview, but the yellow arrow there shows the application site. And as you can see, there is a building, a caravan has been placed onto the site temporarily. But the position of that is where this dwelling house, this permanent dwelling house would be located. And then this is looking from the junction into the site, looking north. And then to the south. And then just coming closer into the site itself, you can see the existing house to the right there, and then the caravan that's been placed on the site, which is where the new house would be located. And the top photo is just looking towards the houses, the two other houses to the north side, which are accessed separately, and then just a view from within the site looking to the south. And then a couple of images here, which is the rear of the building that's on the site at the moment, the caravan looking towards the existing house, and then the existing access onto the main road from within the site. And then this is just further back within the site, looking back towards the main road. You can see some hedging down the boundary of the site there. And then these are some images of there's, as I said, the Kinnaird Burn runs to the south of the site. So although it's a bit overgrown at this location, there is the arrow indicates the position of that. And then either side of this, I suppose it is a form of access that goes across the burn, but it's purely from within the domestic curtilage. And then this is just looking a bit more around towards in the direction of the M90 along the boundary of the site on the left, and then again on the right, just as you look across the other land in their ownership. And then this was a figure that was submitted by the applicant. So this is in terms of, I suppose, the supplementary guidance for groups of houses. So the application site is highlighted, the building group to the north, which consists of 3 permanent dwelling houses, the road, the B996 to the east, the M90 to the west, where the burn is highlighted more clearly through the middle of their other land. So the site, as we can see, lies in the countryside, sandwiched between the M90 and the B996 to the north of Kelty. On the west side of the B996 is there are about 6 houses, I think, approximately, and then there are 3 dwelling houses on the side of the application appeal site, and they're accessed by a separate access. Hillview and its associated ancillary domestic accommodation and the appeal site are accessed via a separate access. The site currently contains a caravan occupied by the applicant's son and family. Hillview is occupied by the appellant's other son and family, and they reside in the ancillary accommodation at the rear. The land to the south contains an electricity line, and the applicant has removed trees near to the line, although clearly some tree removal across the wider land in their ownership has taken place over the years. The Kinnaird Burn runs to the south of the site. A number of mature trees still exist around the boundaries, especially along the road, and the proposed house is 3 bedrooms and will match the existing house Hillview in design and materials. So the reasons for refusal, firstly, that the proposal is on a greenfield site that is not allocated for development, and development on the site is not explicitly supported by policies in the LDP. It is therefore contrary to policy 9B, brownfield, vacant and derelict land and empty buildings of MPF 4. Secondly, the proposal is contrary to policy 17, rural homes of MPF 4, as it fails to meet any of the 8 criteria listed within policy 17A. The proposal is contrary, thirdly, the proposal is contrary to policy 19, housing in the countryside of LDP2, as it fails to comply with any of the 6 categories listed in the policy. In particular, the site has been specifically cleared of woodland and the boundaries planted with non-native hedging to specifically create a site for development. This is contrary to the Housing in the Countryside Supplementary Guidance, Category 1 building groups. In addition, development of the site does not safeguard the character of the countryside and does not ensure that high standards of design and siting are achieved. Fourthly, the proposal is contrary to policy 14A and B, design quality and place of MPF 4, and policy 1A and 1B, placemaking of the LDP 2. The proposed development would detract from the visual amenity and landscape character of the area and does not contribute to creating a distinctive, pleasant or sustainable place. And finally, the proposal is contrary to policy 39 landscape of the LDP2, as development would conflict with the aim of maintaining and enhancing the landscape qualities of Perth and Kinross. Such piecemeal development sited in an area of former woodland is not appropriate to maintaining and enhancing the landscape qualities of Perth and Kinross. So in terms of the assessment by the Planning Service, MPF 4 policy intent with regard to rural homes is to encourage, promote and facilitate the delivery of more high quality, affordable and sustainable homes in the right locations. The LDP is still to be applied, notwithstanding this being effectively superseded by MPF 4, and in this case the LDP allows for the addition of houses to building groups. The supplementary guidance states that permission will be granted for houses within building groups, providing it can be demonstrated that new housing will respect the character, scale and form of the existing group and will be integrated into the existing layout and building pattern. New housing will not detract from the visual amenity of the group when viewed from the wider landscape, and a high standard of residential amenity will be provided for both existing and new housing. Permission may be granted subject to this criteria for houses which extend the group into a readily definable adjacent site. This will be formed by existing topography, roads or well-established existing landscape features such as watercourses or mature tree belt which provide a suitable setting. Fencing or young trees or hedging planted with the specific intention of creating a site will not be accepted as existing landscape features, nor will the felling of an area of woodland or orchard specifically to create a site. In this case, the past history of the site has demonstrated that the felling of trees and more recently the planting of fast-growing conifer trees along the front and side boundaries has been undertaken with a specific intention of creating a site, which is contrary to the policy and guidance. And it's considered that the proposal would not maintain or enhance the landscape qualities of the area and would not contribute positively to visual amenity. And then in terms of the applicant's case, they state that the site is an acceptable extension of a building group into a definable site which has satisfactory containment to the wider countryside. The dwelling house is acceptable in scale and design within the context of the existing building group and housing nearby across the road to the southeast, and it will not have any adverse impact on the visual amenity or character of the countryside at this location. The site is well contained into a readily definable site with containment to the north by the existing building group, to the east by the B996 public road and to the west and south by the Kinnaird Burn in accordance with the guidance. The burn is a well-established existing landscape feature, more permanent than any woodland in the vicinity. It provides a defensible boundary to any development pressure further south of it from the existing building group to the north. The enforcement case, which related to the land around the proposed house, was closed on the 19th of January 2023, where it was concluded that considering the nature of the breach, it's considered not in the public interest to pursue further. And the status and character of this land in planning terms is therefore considered to be acceptable as it is in its current form. The dwelling house will respect the character, scale and form of the existing group and will be integrated into the existing layout and building pattern. It will not detract from the visual amenity when viewed from the wider landscape, and the plot size affords a high standard of residential amenity for existing and the proposed new house. The design has been revised from the previous application and is traditional in form and is similar in design, scale and materials to the house next door at Hillview. It respects the existing building line addressing the public road and will not have any adverse impact on the quality of the surrounding built and natural environment. It will not have an adverse impact on the visual amenity, character or appearance of the area. And the existing housing on the other side of the road is more noticeable and visually prominent, being on more elevated ground. The former woodland scrub area in the vicinity of and to the south of the site and south of the Kinnaird Burn was regenerated unmanaged woodland and was not characterised by indigenous species. The applicant has proposed significant planting on land in his ownership, including a planting scheme to the south of the burn with native species which will enhance the landscape quality of the area. There are no technical or environmental objections. And in terms of other considerations, transport planning note that a condition is required that the septic tank shall not be emptied from the public road network and the existing access and new driveway shall be used for that purpose. And a further condition for the installation of hard standing and dropped curbs at the access and opposite the access to the property in the interests of school transport and local bus transport. Kinrossshire Civic Trust have objected to the application, and there are no developer contributions required if the appeal is upheld.
Thank you very much for that. We'll open up to questions. So, Councillor Stewart, have you any questions?
Thank you, convener. During your presentation there, you made reference to the burn and you had photographs of the road as well. Would I be right in me thinking we've got a plot that's been divided, however, the plot in question that the application pertains to is sort of bounded by the burn, the road and the property to the north?
Yeah, I mean, effectively, Councillor Stewart, yes. It's not particularly apparent in the report of handling from the planning service that those are existing landscape features, but I think it is quite obvious that they are existing landscape features that do form a defensible boundary, if you like, to where the site is located.
Thank you. Can I, at the end of your presentation, you touched on the design. From my visit, the proposed design plan doesn't look out of keeping from the property to the north and other houses around the area. Would I be right in thinking that?
Yeah, I think there was a previous application which was refused, and I think there were some concerns about the proposed design. It certainly looks like what's been submitted here is to reflect the style of the house next door, the existing house. You know, it's a fairly typical 1.5 story, you know, reasonably traditionally designed house. There's not many modern houses in the group. They're all kind of older properties, but there's a real mix, I would say, of styles in the area.
Thank you.
Councillor James.
Convener, my questions have just been asked by Councillor Stewart. Thanks very much. The only point I was going to make was regarding the power lines. There's something made of the fact that the trees are being cut down willy-nilly, if you like. But would you agree that they probably cut down to allow unhindered access for the power cables? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. I mean, I'm not sure exactly in terms of the history what came first, but I think there's obviously been felling in that area. Whether that's been just carried out or whether it is as a result of being approached to remove the trees from nearby the power line, I'm not entirely sure. But it is a constraint, you know, that power line runs through there. But certainly the plan that they've one of the plans they've submitted shows that whole area being replanted, apart from the power line zone.
I have one question. This goes back to Hillview itself, which was refused by Perth Kinross at the time. Subsequently went to a reporter who overturned the case and granted the application, but seems to imply that the fact that it was there, obviously the Perth's query or concern was the fact that by building this one would allow further houses to be built. And he said here that it was his opinion that this the woodland that was to surround the property would imply there was no further building possible. Is this a material consideration? Is what I'm coming to the question.
Yes, I would say, well, any history is obviously material, and there's been previous applications approved, previous appeals upheld, and you know there was obviously some reference there to you know, planting in an area that would, you know, effectively stop any further kind of incremental development. I think what's possibly not clear is exactly where that would be, because clearly, although there's been tree felling, you know, there were probably some trees on this site at some point. When I've looked at the site, I've gone back onto Google as far as 2009. Now there are more trees there then than there are now. But where the line is between where those trees were, or you know, it's not that easy, unfortunately, to work out exactly where that is. But the one thing I would say is, if you're thinking about precedent, perhaps if something was to go on this site, you know, does it open the floodgates, so to speak? I would say not, because you know what you are looking here at is, you know, a significant landscaping plan that will once and for all, or whatever phrase you want to use, you know, completely contain that site.
Thank you very much. In absence of any more questions, members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we need more information? Councillor Stewart?
I'm happy to proceed.
And Councillor James?
Likewise, convener.
And I too am happy to proceed. So I'll start us off on this one. There's obviously a lot of planning history here, as we've seen. The most recent case was the previous one, which was a similar, almost the same property. I think it was a bungalow. It's now a 1.5 story house. The reasons for refusal were the same as we've got in front of us. I think the core of this, in my mind, is comes back, as I questioned, the actual building of Hillview. It was originally refused by Perth and Kinross, as a big question, because of a fear that it would open the door to further development. That was subsequently granted on an appeal with the Scottish Reporter. But in that appeal notice, although he agreed to it, it said quite clearly, given the containment provided by the woodland to the south, the council's concerned that allowing the appeal could lead to further development to Burn Beyond is unlikely to be realised because the woodland to the south provided a suitable landscape framework. Now, I accept the point that it's very difficult to look back and see where that line is, but I think the implication of the appeal was that further building would stop. And I think that's the important point, and that implication is there. It's inferred that there'll be no more, and although the woodland has been removed to some extent, the implication is still there. And on that basis, I feel that I'm going to refuse the appeal. I don't think building was intended to be extended into that plot, and therefore I'm refusing the appeal based upon the reasons for refusal as put forward by the planning officer. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, convener. Nothing more to add. I concur with your thoughts, and I am minded to refuse the appeal.
Thank you. And Councillor James.
I suppose it's right. My decision is irrelevant. However, I would have disagreed with both yourself, convener, and Councillor Stewart. I agree with you that it was said that the planting to the south of the burn, I think that's quite important. The south of the burn would prevent anything further. This application is actually north of the burn, if you like. So the wooded area was the other side of the burn. I think the burn is the deciding factor, or it creates the boundary, and therefore I think this would have quite happily fitted in a housing group, because it is bounded on one side by a road, the burn the other side, house to the top. So I would have been quite sympathetic, and I'd have actually allowed this to go ahead, but on a majority, I'm outnumbered. But thank you.
Okay, so Mr. MacLeod, we have a 2-to-1 majority to uphold the planning officer's refusal.
Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Members will now move on to item 4.2, which is the replacement of existing fence in retrospect at Perthshire Caravans Errol in Perth. Mrs. Tierney, if you could introduce again for us.
Thank you, convener. So I think we're probably all quite aware where Perthshire Caravans is, but anyway, it's to the south of the A90 there, in between Dundee and Perth. And then zooming in on the business there with the A90 running to the north, and then the access road to the south there, and the fence is in the location of the where the yellow line is along that field boundary there to the right hand side. And then this is the site plan that was submitted with the application. So that is all the land in the ownership of the applicant and the business. And then again here, the drawings that show on the top left there, the location of the fence, where the red line is, and then to the bottom there, just zooming in a bit more detail, obviously just in terms of all the elevations of the fence that's been erected. And then this is a more detailed plan which shows the most recent permission for additional caravan storage to the top side there next to the A90. The land to the south there, which is just the open white area, is land in their ownership, but there's no permissions in place on that piece of ground. And then the red line at the bottom again, where the fence is located. This is an image of the fence which existed in this location. This is from the appellant's pack of information for your information. And then that's what the existing fence looked like in terms of the kind of the open mesh style. And then this is the proposed fence, and in terms of each of those parts of the elevation, a galvanized steel palisade security fence essentially. And then all the lengths of the various elevations, some length 125 meters long, and then some photographs. So this is the around the existing access and egress into the business area. So there's already some similar fencing in that location around the entrance and exit. And then as we go along the road, you can see between that and where the fence is located, a kind of tall Leylandii hedge in that location, some houses on the other side of the road. And then the image on the right is the opposite side of the road from where the fence is. So you can kind of see the more agricultural nature of the ground and kind of post and wire fencing and so on. And then this is the fence that's been erected. So obviously the fence that existed has been removed and this has been put in its place, and it runs the whole length of 125 metres along the road. And then this is looking from the distance, from the east, looking back towards the fence. So in the distance you can see it coming into view, just where the road kind of goes out of view. And then as we come in closer on the right, and this is just now just looking at each section of fence as you go along the road, you can start to see some of the storage area across the field. And then this again, looking back towards the existing housing. And again, this is, a kind of view, I suppose, through the fence where you can see the caravans, and then the existing storage area on the right towards the A90. And then a couple of images that the appellant has provided as well, which show from inside the field, the fence, some planting that they've carried out, and then a ditch and the material that's been taken out of that, kind of forming a bund between that and the planting that's been carried out. So, by way of introduction, obviously Perthshire Caravans is a long-established caravan dealer located just off the A90 between Dundee and Perth. Retrospective permission is sought for a 1.8 metre high metal palisade fence, which replaced an existing timber and wire stock-proof fence at the site. It's 125 metres long along the roadside, which marks the southern boundary of the business. No permission for caravan storage exists in the field to the immediate north of the fence, but as the area to the north, adjacent to the A90, was granted permission in 2015. And some of the existing business area is enclosed by similar style fencing. The reason for refusal stated that the proposal, by virtue of its design, height, extent, prominent roadside position and rural location, results in an incongruous feature which is imposing, oppressive, overbearing and out of keeping with the rural character of the area. Refusal would therefore be in line with Policy 14C of MPF 4, which states that development proposals that are poorly designed and detrimental to the amenity of the surrounding area will not be supported. Furthermore, approval would be contrary to policies 1A, 1B, C and 8B of Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan 2 and policies 14A and B and 29B of MPF 4, which seek to ensure that development contributes positively to the quality of the surrounding environment in terms of design, position, proportions, finishes and appearance in order to respect the character and amenity of the place. In terms of the assessment by the Planning Service, they note that the location of the fence is both physically and visually separated from the main business area and caravan compound. While it is appreciated that similar fences exist at the business, the style of this fence in this location is inappropriate as it is more akin to an industrial estate than an agricultural setting. The fence limits the visual permeability of the field boundary, contrary to the fence which previously existed and which afforded a high degree of visual permeability and which was sympathetic to the rural context. The applicant has stated that Perthshire Caravans is a long-established family business operating from this site for over 80 years. The business was broken into last summer and various stock was stolen. The thieves broke into the premises in this location where the fence is located, and the owners sought to replace the previous fencing with a more robust fence for security purposes. Although this was done without permission, it had to be done to avoid their insurance becoming void. The appellant has requested that the LRB consider visiting the site rather than relying on various photographs and images. The grounds for the review include, firstly, that the height and extent of the fence along the road is unchanged, but that the style of fence erected is what is required to deter theft. It can be painted green, and that on balance this will make it more in keeping with the countryside location. Secondly, the view of the planning service that the area is rural in character is not agreed with, and the immediate landscape and streetscape is a pattern of man-made and commercial enterprises, including the busy A90 trunk road and lighting, the nearby Horn Cafe, Middlebank driving range, along with Business Park, winery and visitor centre, along with the existing caravan business itself, power lines and telephone poles and wires, 4 nearby houses on Grange Road, and existing identical fencing. Thirdly, that the amenity of the surrounding area is already characterised by those properties mentioned above, and the comments about the fence being visible from a nearby property are inaccurate. Fourthly, the design position and proportions are all unchanged, and it can be painted a more acceptable colour. And finally, the fact that there is no building on the field beside the fence does not imply that it is used for farming. It is land within the ownership of the commercial business. Policy 8, Rural Business and Diversification of the LDP, says favourable consideration can be given to the expansion of existing businesses, and the fence is to protect the high-value assets of the business and would match the other fences around it. They've also noted other material considerations as being important, including that the inferior fence which existed made no commercial sense, that their insurance will cease if the fence is removed, that the long-standing presence of the business is exceptional and the owners place huge importance on security and accountability and have responded reasonably and proportionately to that the colour of the fence can be changed to make it acceptable, and that a shallow ditch, bund and tree belt has also been created to further deter thieves. And then in terms of other matters, there is one representation which notes the industrial design of the fence is out of keeping with the rural area, and there are no roads or access implications from transportation.
Thank you for that. Councillor James, any questions?
No questions, thanks, Convener. I've got all the information I need here, thanks.
And Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Convener. I have no questions.
Just one that looked to me that there's no gate in the new fence. Is that right? It looked to me there wasn't on the photographs there.
Sorry, Convener. No, I don't think there is. No, there's not.
Okay, fine. Okay, members, right. That's the absence of any further questions then. Members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is, the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we need more information? Councillor James?
I'm happy to proceed.
Councillor Stewart?
I'm happy to proceed.
And I too am happy to proceed on this one. So, Councillor James, could you start us off?
Yep, thanks, Convener. Rural business. Actually, I pass this most days on my way to work, and this type of fencing around the front of the property onto the A90 has been there for a considerable amount of time. And I noticed this is only replacing stock-proof fencing, which I from personal experience, stock-proof fencing isn't the best, even when you haven't got stock in there. And I think this gentleman's trying to protect his business, which, in all honesty, I would be doing exactly the same had I suffered theft like he has. He's made considerable effort by putting a ditch and planting inside the land, which is in his ownership. And I would also see it as perhaps future-proofing his business. If it's doing well and he expanded, he might want to extend into that field, obviously with planning permission, but you know, he's creating a boundary. I don't think it's too onerous. The only thing is, and I was looking at page 98 of our papers, in his appeal, he's actually come up with quite a sensible solution, because I think the only thing that makes it unpalatable, I think, for perhaps the residents or people passing, is that it does look very industrial. And yes, actually, it is an industrial site if you want to take it that way. However, he has said the opportunity for the local review body to impose a planning condition which would require the proposed colour finish to be green to better integrate. I think that's actually quite a sensible idea. Yeah, okay, it's at a cost, but I think the cost is negligible when you compare that with the replacement of that fence. I'm quite happy to allow him to keep that fence. Convener, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. So I'll come in now if I may. Yes, obviously, the owner's concern is the theft of caravans. That's always a concern to any business, I'm sure. And I think that the value mentioned here was something in the region of 164,000. So obviously, there's a desire to improve security. And I suspect in this instance, the owner's probably gone back to the original installer for the remaining fence to install this in. Yes, I would agree with some of the comments and the objector. In this instance, I think the design could be probably a bit better than what it is. It's a bit more thought put into it, but I appreciate there was an urgency to get this in place. I understand the comments from the officers, but I think the security of the site is an overwhelming factor, a material factor in this one. And whilst, as I say, I think a better design could have been put in place. Understand the urgency. And it isn't really a rural area as such, as you've mentioned. We've already got this site with its existing fence. We've got the Horn Bar nearby. I know the area quite well myself. I've been there several times and driven past, obviously, many a time. So my inclination, again, is to agree the appeal, to accept the appeal. I think it's an acceptable one in this instance. As I say, better choice of fencing. But I do agree with you that I think if as we're happy to proceed, there should be a condition for this to be painted green, and if possible within a time set on that condition. But I'll pass on to Councillor Stewart now.
Thank you, Convener. After visiting the site, and I know the area very well, and I hear both your comments, Convener and Councillor James. However, I do feel that this fence, and the word is incongruous. I recognise it's similar fencing, but it's surrounding caravans and camper vans and industrial. But I think it's where it's sited, and it's just a bit unfortunate that there's obviously land there to dig a ditch in a bund. So I agree, Convener, that maybe there could have been things done differently. But I think in this situation, I would agree with the officers and their letter of refusal.
Thank you for that. So, Mr. McLeod, we're back on a 2-to-1 majority on this one to agree the appeal, but to add a condition. I think Councillor James is in agreement with me that the fence should be painted green, a green colour, green hue, perhaps a better way, and possibly within a time limit, if we can set a time limit within the condition as well. Okay.
Thank you, Convener. Duly noted. We can obviously instruct the planning officers to insert some sort of planning condition as you suggest, and we can obviously keep them advised of the proposed time limit as well in there.
Okay. Can we actually designate the time limit, or
I was going to say if you want to specify that time yourselves, that's absolutely fine. I would suggest that whilst it would be normal to allow a reasonable period of time for that to be done, which may be longer than 3 months, say, I think in this case, the sooner it is carried out, the better. So I would advise that the shortest period of time, but it's entirely up to you.
Well, I was thinking that 3 months is the time limit anyway. So if Councillor James is going to come in, over to you, sir.
Yeah, I just on a very short time scale like that, because don't forget we're only in February. The weather is not the best, and if you're going to paint, and I would imagine that's going to be sprayed, because of the size of it. 3 months to try and arrange a contractor to come in to do it and get the weather to do it. I think 3 months might be a little on the tight side. Maybe 6 months, which would take them into the summer.
I would split them and say 4
Okay.
4 months, 4 months then. But I think it needs to be done quickly because obviously it does stand out badly in the area. And I think if we can get it painted green, it will blend back into the agricultural side. So if we say 4 months, that will take us into what, March, April, May, June time. So should be ample time to do it.
Perfect. I've just noted that down, 4 months.
Thank you, members. So we'll now move on to the last paper today. And as I have a very short agenda for us today. This is item 433, relates to the erection of a dwelling house and associated accommodation units, erection of polytunnel, installation of wastewater treatment system, installation of water storage and associated works, land 300 metres southeast of Dalrannoch Farm, the Ross in Comrie. Mrs. Journey, if you could introduce this one.
Thank you, convener. So the location of the application and appeals site is where the yellow star is located there. So for those of you familiar with Comrie, obviously to the south of Comrie there, along the road to the west of Cultybragan Camp is the best point of interest nearby. And then just zooming in there on the kind of surrounding area, so you can obviously see Cultybragan to the top side of the image there, and the location site on the north side of the minor road there, between the road and the water of Ruchil. And then some drawings submitted with the application. So again, in this case, we've got the blue land, which is the land in the ownership of the applicant, highlighted there. And then the red line depicts the application site boundary. So we have the access off the main road, the road to the accommodation units in the middle of the site, and then carrying on to the area for the Porta polytunnel area. And then looking in a bit more detail at this is effectively the proposal, I suppose, where you see the couple of pods and the polytunnel area, and obviously, although it's not part of the planning application, you can see that the planting that the applicant is in the process of carrying out at the site. And then just kind of zooming in on the drawings submitted with the application. So the one on the left is the access off the road. And obviously we've got a wastewater treatment system in the middle of the site there, and coming up to where the pods are located. And then on the right hand side, carrying on to where the polytunnel area would be. And then again, this is just another image which shows the proposed planting that would go around the access down into the centre of the site. And then in a bit more detail, the access, it's an existing field access that they have there, but it's just a field access at present, and this would be where the formal access to the site would be for parking and turning. And then coming through the centre of the site, on the left-hand side there for the wastewater system, water storage as well, and the polytunnel area. And then this is the roof plans of the pods, which would be in the centre of the site. So two accommodation units, effectively one dwelling house, but contained within two separate pod buildings. And then these are some elevations, which show some of the difference in levels across the site, which maybe become a bit more apparent in the photographs. Very simple, kind of agricultural style of building. And again, some more elevations there. Then sections through the buildings and floor plans. So as you can see, the accommodation is split across the two pods in terms of bedrooms and living space. And then this is the roof plan and the elevations for the polytunnel growing area. And then we have some photographs. So this is the access road, which is the road that leads from Cultibragan Camp along to the access. So you can see the existing field gate just off the side of the road there. So the image on the left is looking towards the west, and the image on the right is looking back towards Comrie. And then the image on the left again is a little bit further along that road towards Comrie, and then another image of the existing access into the site. And then these are some, so the arrows indicate the, I'm going to say approximate because it is quite a large open area of where each of the pods and polytunnels would be located. But the left one there is looking back towards Comrie, so the arrow is roughly where the polytunnel area would be, heading towards the water. And then the image on the right is looking towards where the pod units would be, and that land does drop down towards the water's edge. The image on the left is looking west across the open ground that's there at the moment. In fact, they both are. They're both looking west. And just gives you a picture of the surrounding landscape, I suppose. And some tree planting and so on has already been carried out by the applicant at the site. And then this is kind of standing in the centre of the site, looking down towards where the polytunnel area would be. You can see the kind of, there's some tree protection tubes there either side, and there's kind of a gap through the middle, and that would be where the access would go round. And then from this side, this is from the western edge of the site nearer the water, looking back towards Comrie. So the arrows there show where the polytunnel area would be, and then the pods on the right hand side. And then this is looking from the site back out to the main road. So you can see the existing access there. And then this is for information because there is a reference within the report to flooding. This is the SEPA flood maps. So in terms of river flooding in this case. So the application site is broadly within the yellow circle area. So the area in the centre of the site where the arrows are does show the location of where the development would be, and it does appear there is no direct flood risk actually on those sites, but you can see the proximity of the flood map, and there's some question about the access, whether there would be any impact on the access into the site, which would be, I suppose, where the flood area kind of starts drifting across the road there. It's just not particularly clear exactly where the flood area would be in relation to the access point into the site that's alluded to in the papers. Sorry about that. The site is located on the outskirts of Comrie to the southwest of Cultibragan Camp. The land in the ownership of the applicant stretches along an area of riverside pasture land, and the site lies between the Water of Rockhill and the minor public road to Glenartney. The wider area is characterised by the same riverside land and pockets of woodland and hillier ground to the south and further to the north. There is an existing field access onto the minor road, which will be used as the vehicular access into the site. The proposed accommodation units are split into two separate parts comprising east and west cabins. Plans indicate that the west cabin would be used as the main bedroom living area, while the east one, approximately 19 metres away, would contain the kitchen, dining and WC showering facilities. The proposal seeks to create an ecologically sustainable living and working environment which will allow the applicant to live on site and restore native woodland, enhance biodiversity, reduce flooding, help carbon capture and provide them with a sustainable supply of organic vegetable crops. The proposed accommodation is deemed essential to allow the applicant to live on site and directly manage and develop their aspirational objectives for the wider landholding. The associated works include a polytunnel and market garden growing area, a wastewater treatment plant, reed bed filtration areas, together with private water connection points from the Ruchel and a water storage area. The reasons for refusal are, firstly, the proposals are contrary to MPF 4, policies 9, brownfield, vacant and derelict land and empty buildings, 17, rural homes, and LDP 2, policy 19, housing in the countryside, and associated supplementary guidance, as the development does not meet any of the relevant criteria which would enable support of new residential units within the countryside. Secondly, the proposals are contrary to MPF 4 Policy 14, Design Quality and Place, and LDP 2 Placemaking Policies 1A and 1B, Parts A, B, C and F, Policy 39 Landscape and associated supplementary guidance, as the proposals, by reason of their prominent locations, juxtaposition, lack of cohesion and screening, would not contribute positively to the quality of the surrounding area, resulting in adverse visual amenity and landscape impacts. Thirdly, the proposals are contrary to MPF 4 Policy 13 Sustainable Transport and LDP 2 Policy 60B Transport Standards and Accessibility Requirements, new development proposals, as insufficient information has been provided in respect of the required visibility displays, which would verify that the development could be provided with a safe means of vehicular access. And fourthly, the proposals are contrary to MPF 4 Policy 22 Flood Risk and Water Management and LDP 2 Policies 52 New Development and Flooding and 53 Water Environment and Drainage, in that there is a presumption against built development in areas at risk of flooding. Insufficient information has been provided to determine what the on or off-site flood or drainage related impacts of the development may be or how they could be mitigated. So in terms of the assessment by the Planning Service, in terms of the principle, the closest applicable clause of MPF 4 Policy 17, Clause 5, states that housing in a rural area can be acceptable where it is demonstrated to be necessary to support the sustainable management of a viable rural business or croft, and there is an essential need for a worker, including those taking majority control of a farm business, to live permanently or at or near their place of work. This is not the case with this application, and there are no other MPF 4 clauses which could apply. Turning to the LDP, which remains a consideration in PKC, the only category of the housing in the countryside supplementary guidance which could apply relates to 3.5 houses for sustainable living, which requires not only a lifestyle approach to be clearly evident, but also for it to be demonstrated that any new house is essential as an integral part of an overall scheme for the management or use of land, which will allow its occupants to be largely self-sufficient. Further, that the development is at the forefront of sustainability and goes beyond renewable technologies, which are now commonplace, such as heat pumps and solar panels. The applicant has placed much emphasis on the lifestyle credentials and their intentions to improve biodiversity, reduce flooding and carbon, through the planting of trees, cycling where possible to and from Comrie, and being largely self-sufficient by growing organic vegetables. However, while commendable, it is not considered that these future aspirations are sufficient to justify a dwelling house. It is noted that the applicant's partner is understood it's understood that the obstructed visibility relates to trees, as noted elsewhere. The applicant will address this issue if when requested to do so by PKC. And they're in the process of developing a renewable energy startup business, the office of which will be within one of the cabins. However, there's no apparent link with this to any cutting-edge renewable technology or commercial activities at the site, which would require a permanent residential base in this rural location. It is acknowledged that the design approach to break up the mass of the house into two pods, but this appears impractical and inefficient in terms of resources and sustainable living. While the cabins will be made locally and insulated to a high standard, incorporating a ground source heat pump for hot water and solar panels for energy, this is technology which is relatively mainstream now in terms of availability and as required by building standards. In terms of landscape impact, the adjacent public road forms the boundary of the Upper Strathearn local landscape area. The holding, nonetheless, as is the case with the rest of Glenartney and lowlands around the Comrie, provide a scenic landscape backdrop. Again, while the pods are a modern interpretation of traditional agricultural buildings, their location is relatively open and exposed, and it will take time for any tree planting to become established to any level which would create a sense of containment. In terms of the case put forward by the applicant, they note that the supplementary guidance clause 3.5, houses for sustainable living, does not require a full engagement in commercial activities. The requirement is to live and work sustainably on the land, which the applicant intends to achieve through a balanced mix of farming and agroforestry activities and practices. The overall proposal, including accommodation, is fully compatible with being essential as an integral part of an overall scheme for the management or use of land, which will allow its occupants to be largely self-sufficient. The applicant has been living with her parents for the previous 2 years, which will likely be unsustainable in the longer term. Within the wider context of the current housing, climate and environmental crisis, the applicant is proposing to construct modest, environmentally sustainable and culturally contextual accommodation set within a major landscape and environmental enhancement project and to live sustainably within and from the landholding. The applicant's family is from the west of Scotland, where clearances were once commonplace. Equally, Glenartney, which used to support a population of thousands, is now largely deserted apart from the occasional farm. The applicant would like to restore and maintain a reconnection with the land based upon balanced farming, ecology and sustainability, and within the wider community. The applicant has a long and varied background of living and working in the sustainable and organic horticulture sector and has been involved in landscape scale environmental enhancement schemes and projects. The proposed accommodation, which the council recognises to be modest in scale and form, is a key element of this lifestyle approach. Before the submission of the application, contracts were agreed with the Scottish Government for the construction of deer fencing and for the planting of 15,000 native woodland trees for landscape and biodiversity enhancement and climate capture on the landholding. This work will commence in February 2025. Year-round intensive food crop production cannot practically proceed until permission is granted for the polytunnel. The applicant prefers their sleeping accommodation to be cold, making separate accommodation for the sleeping area a logical choice. However, if there are concerns about this, they're open to review the design and to consider the integration of the cabins into a single unit. The applicant has requested more guidance and information from the council on what technologies may be currently considered to be at the forefront of sustainability. Without such guidance, the applicant will find it difficult or impossible to meet a required standard. Scottish Forestry has approved the creation of the extensive native woodland development on the landholding for the purposes of biodiversity, landscape enhancement and carbon capture. Visually and ecologically, the proposed project connects with the adjacent Comrie Community Native Woodland Creation Scheme immediately above the landholding. The applicant recognises that the present landform openness is an established attribute of the Scottish landscape. It should, however, be noted that this openness is a consequence of the relatively recent clearance of the pre-existing natural and native woodland landscape and ecology. As a result of such activity, Scotland possesses a nature-depleted environment with one of the lowest percentages of native woodland cover in Europe. Further drainage information can be provided, along with further flooding information in consultation with SEPA, and the applicant will address the visibility if or when requested to do so. It is understood that the obstructed visibility relates to trees, and the applicant will address this if and when requested to do so, along with any building standards requirements. In terms of other information, the flood team note that the SEPA flood maps indicate extensive fluvial flooding near the site boundary. SEPA flood maps are unlikely to accurately represent the flood extents from this burn due to its small size, and therefore information is required on the catchment size and topographic level of the burn in relation to the property levels and direction of flow if the burn overtops. A full flood risk assessment may then be required. Depending on the conclusion of further details, the applicant should consider the entrance location in relation to SEPA flood maps. The applicant indicates that a drainage impact assessment will be provided, but one has not been submitted. The consultee on this states that due to a lesser amount of hard standing within the site a drainage impact assessment may not be necessary. However, this is a requirement of Perth and Kinross Council. And Environmental Health have recommended a noise condition with regard to the heat pump and an informative water supply if the appeal is upheld, and there are no developer contributions required by this development. Thank you.
Thank you for all of that. We'll open up to questions. If I could start off on this one. Two things really. First of all, my understanding from the report is this is not to be a commercial or any part commercial. It's for the owner's personal use, self-sustainability for the crops, is my understanding. And the second part was my brain's gone blank there, so we'll stick to that first of all. But it's gone blank completely.
Yeah, I'll maybe come back to you. No, you're right. This isn't a business. It's not a commercial operation. There are other policies in the LDP that do allow houses in certain circumstances. It's purely this is to do with the management of the land and the clause in the supplementary guidance that allows houses for sustainable living. So in those cases, obviously, you know, there's no things like business cases and things like that required.
By miracle, my mind has come back again. It's this concept, this phraseology, forefront of sustainability. The applicant obviously is unsure. I'm just wondering, I'm going to put you on the spot, but in your experience, have you any thought of what the forefront of sustainability might be if we eliminate solar panels and any sort of small wind turbines or air source heat pumps, whatever? Have you come across anything that might be even classified as the forefront?
No, convener, it's an interesting one because a lot of these elements are kind of standard requirements now in terms of regulations, but also aspirations of people building their own homes. So, you know, I think it's a reasonable question that they've asked about, you know, what is that? I'm afraid I can't answer that, though.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, convener. I know the area well. I'm not aware of any within the area proposed that there's been any historical buildings at all.
Sorry, I'm not getting. Sorry.
Visiting the site, I didn't see that there's been buildings on the land, and I'm not aware of anything historically in that area that's been used in previous times for agricultural use.
So, Councillor Stewart, I think there is some reference in the pack submitted by the appellant, which includes some very historical maps. I can't point to the exact page in the papers, but you know, I think it's fair to say that at various historical points in time, there's probably been habitation along this road, and there may have been buildings. But if you look at the policies and the guidance that you would now use to determine, say, a site is a brownfield site, it would need to be obvious that there's something there at the moment that would qualify as a brownfield site. Sorry,
Yeah, thank you. I was just wanting to clarify that I wasn't reading things erroneously.
Councillor James.
I don't think I've anything further to ask other than what we've already got in our paperwork. Thanks, convener.
Thank you then. So in the absence of any questions, members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we need more information? Councillor Stewart.
I'm ready to proceed.
And Councillor James.
I'm ready to proceed.
And I too am ready to proceed. So on this occasion, Councillor Stewart, if you could start us off.
Thank you, convener. a very interesting application. And I think I certainly couldn't fault the idea behind the biodiversity and trying to contribute to carbon capture and preparing your lifestyle around organic food and being part of the Good Food Nation. However, I will have to side with the officers and refuse the appeal on this occasion.
Thank you. Councillor James.
I'm in agreement with Councillor Stewart on this one. I mean, there's awful lot of information here, but by the same token, there's a lot of important issues that aren't addressed. And I think our officers have it right. Flooding's an issue, transport, you know, all of the things that were given as reasons for refusal. I don't see any change to that in this appeal. So I'm happy to, or mindful to go with the officer's decision to refuse.
Thank you for that. Like the two of you, I think there is an idea here, a good idea, to be honest, to have self-sustainability. It's not new. I'm not trying to make fun of it, but I think we all remember a television program called The Good Life many years ago on a much smaller scale in Surbiton in South London. But it was an idea, and I mean, the idea carries here, and I can't find fault in that. But we've got two basic problems, I think, before us. First of all, we've got reports which we haven't got before us, reports on flooding, on drainage, and the visibility displays on the site access. Now, in other cases, perhaps we could have deferred that for those reports to come in. But I think in this occasion, the other core problem is the concept of building the cabins on the site. This concept of forefront of sustainability is a difficult one, and I do side with the applicants there. And what is that? What is the forefront of sustainability? But the core part here is that they have to be essential. Have to be essential to the site, and I don't think that's been proved here at all. The applicant lives in Comrie, which is a short distance away, and I feel at this stage there's been no real clear proof of why there would need to be a residence on the site. We can't change the application, obviously, so really and truly the only way forward here is for us to refuse, and I concur with my two colleagues to refuse the appeal. I think the applicant should look into this very carefully, try and talk to the planning officers to try and put something together, because as I say, there is an idea here, and I don't think it should be just left to lapse. So I wish them well in that sense, but you know, you need to go more with the planning officers to sort out what's needed, and certainly these reports need to be included with an application for consideration. So as it stands at the moment, I concur with my colleagues to refuse the appeal. Mr. McLeod, again, a clear decision on this one to refuse.
Thank you, Convener.
And that brings us to the end of the papers this afternoon, sorry. So my colleagues, I thank you again for your participation and being present with us. Thank you, Mrs. Tierney, Councillor Stewart, Councillor James, Audrey at the other end there, been very quiet. And of course, Mr. McLeod, thank you for your input today. And I again welcome you to the committee and hope you'll join us again. We put you off anyway. Thank you, everybody, and that concludes the meeting today. Thank you.